Welcome to The First Turn. I'm your host, Hyena, and today, Llama and I are talking about This Week in Warhammer. If you like what you hear, give us a like, comment, subscribe, or share, or let us know if there's something you'd like to hear us talk about. Alright, let's get to it.
Welcome to The First Turn. I'm Hyena.
I'm Llama.
Today we're talking about This Week in Warhammer. Nothing really from my baby.
No.
AoS had the Gloomspite Gitz box come out, and we got to see some of what their advanced rules look like. Not disappointed, especially with the new stuff.
I think they look like a lot of fun.
I don't think they got much in the way of changes for their index stuff, but at least the new Gitmob stuff looks pretty great. We got points released online, at least preliminary ones, to see what they're starting at, and I think the points are fine. Maybe a little high for a few units that maybe lost some stuff with the new books. Mechanics changes. Scragrot was on that list. Trug maybe, because he lost some synergy stuff. But we'll see. We'll see how it shakes out. These might not be points that were meant to be permanent. This might be until the book comes out proper.
Which it kind of feels like they do that a bit now, where it's like they drop almost like a first round of points when an army gets updated, and then it's like play with it for a few weeks, and then we'll make a quick adjustment.
40K, the Krieg were like that.
Yeah. Yep.
Where they came in really, really low on points, and they got bumped up immediately.
Yeah.
They had anytime you got a character who only costs like 25 points, it's just 35, whatever it is. It's just like
I remember when 8th edition came out. That was the first edition where we had indexes, and it was the first real revolution in the game because 3rd through 7th were all the same. And one of the things that happened was, because Forge World was still a thing, for both Chaos and Imperium, you randomly had these characters who were like 15 points, but were psychers with 3 wounds and couldn't be targeted. And it was so abusive, and so you had players for doing both Imperial Soup and Chaos Soup who would just run as many of those as they could.
Yeah, you had some characters in Astra Militarum. You had some characters in was the Demon Hosts for Chaos that were like that.
It was a 3-wound psyker for 15 points.
Yeah,
and you couldn't target him.
Well, it was funny because he would like get boosted up to like Strength 7, Tough 7. 7 attacks, or something crazy like that. Yeah, there was some stuff like that. That was just like, why was this ever?
And you could keep buying them because at the time everybody could take Smite, so it was I've got all these 15-point D3 mortal wound bombs.
What was it? The Primaris Psychers for Astra Militarum were like that. They were like 20 points apiece, and they had smites on a D6 instead of 2D6, which meant it was just like 50% of the time they just did their smite, even though it was, I think it was maybe less damage or something, but it was just like you would just spam them.
Yep.
And be like, all right, well, nearest thing takes 7 mortal wounds. Absurd.
But these preliminary points for Gitz, we'll see if they stick. It does look like the new Wolf Rider guys and chariots are priced appropriately, or at least incentivized to move.
Yeah, I think they're fine. I mean, Heavy Cav coming in at 33 points apiece, basically, is solid. I mean, that's fine. We got some, they've got medium cav, they got cavalry support, they've got chariots, they got all this stuff, and it's all pretty much on the low end of what those kinds of units usually cost for other armies. I mean, we're not even talking about sacrificing much in the way of mobility or durability for these units either, and it's just they just are priced pretty well.
They don't have a ton of rend, so they paper cut to death.
But that's most chariots.
Yeah,
most chariots are like that. They don't have a lot of rend, but when they charge in, they deal mortal wounds. When they zip out, they pull through. They do mortal wounds. They have an ability that if you're in combat, you leave and you deal mortal wounds. Well, mortal damage is pretty damn good.
It is.
So it might add some of that stuff to the army that it kind of doesn't have it already.
Yeah, and super cool new models. I got to look at the box contents, and it was packaged the same way we've seen those special edition boxes, where it's like the unique like cardboard puzzle on the inside, and then very premium book, and everything feels like you're getting a premium product. But the Goblin bits, I tell you, it's what we've seen with their plastic lately, where they get these guys down pretty small, pretty fine detail. But
I mean, you look at the detail in the pictures that you see online, you're like, oh, these guys have got to be scaled up.
Right?
They're not.
Nope.
They are very, very tiny,
and yet very sharp.
Yep.
We were commenting on that with the Middle Earth plastics, where it's an even smaller scale.
Because you've got 40K and AoS now are scaled to about 30 mil.
Mm-hmm.
They're big. They're generally a higher scale. Middle Earth is still like 25 mil.
Yeah.
So when you see Gandalf or you see Saruman, out of the box, you're like, whoa, he's tiny. Like, it's just a testament to when you see a really good paint job of one of those models that
and yet
it's impressive.
And to what they can get detail wise with their plastic, like, because the cuts in them are still real sharp. And anyway, these goblins, while on that larger Sigmar scale, are very small, and the details on their chariot small. The wolves, but they look great. They look flavorful. Not every kit comes in this new box. The boss and shaman dual kit on chariot's not out yet, and the artillery.
The catapult's not in there. The Doom Diver.
That's in there.
There was the character catapult, and then they are importing in the Underworld Warband.
Okay.
With 3 Wolf Riders into it as a character plus bodyguard.
And then we have a regular 5-man Snarlfang pack that's now
correct
in the game.
That already existed. That's already sold separately. And then there's one other thing. Oh, the new character, the named character is not in there. The Sun Chaser.
The one on the wolf?
The one, the big wolf.
He was in there.
The big cool wolf. He's in that one?
Yeah, he's in that one.
I thought it was a generic character.
No, he's the guy.
Okay.
Yeah. Or that's the only guy I saw in the book. I didn't see a generic one.
I guess maybe the generic one is the dude from the Underworld Warband.
Okay.
He's now just a Snarl boss on
Yep.
Snarlfang or whatever.
Yep.
Okay.
I think their rules look really neat. They have a lot of ways to make the opponent's attacks suck, which is a theme with goblins. If anyone has played against the Stabbas or archers and they have the Nettas, this is a little more general, whereas those, it's against infantry and you got to roll a 3 to do it. This is just like you're standing near him. This boss, you suck. Your attacks are -1 to hit.
It's pretty brutal.
Yeah,
that's pretty brutal. I think there's some stuff we're overlooking as a community for how good these guys are going to be because they're fast.
They're really fast.
They're fairly durable. Like there's some support stuff through the army there. I think they're going to come out just fine.
Yep. Well, and Gitz were already, I guess, performance-wise, doing pretty well. A lot of their rules remain the same with the changes to the moon cycle notwithstanding. And then this stuff's just all new. So I have a feeling it just gives them more to do.
Yeah. Unless taking this stuff as a liability just makes their win rate less. But no, I mean, you know what I mean? That's the only thing that I could see tanking their win rates is if this new stuff isn't good enough and people are trying to play with it.
Right. And
that tanks the win rate. None of the other stuff really changed too much. I mean, like trolls are still killy and tough and regenerate, and it's still the same army.
Yeah, and one of the detachments in this one is a troll one. It was a Troggoth themed one where it was like they get to heal in combat.
Yeah, after they fight, they heal.
Yeah. It's like oof.
I think they had something very similar previously. That was an artifact. I don't know. It was something that let them do that. Or maybe it was a character aura. I don't remember. It was something like that. But this is an army of renown that lets them do it, right?
I thought it was one of the detachments, but I think it only affected Troggoths.
Okay.
So you'd be sacrificing. You'd be getting no bonus rules on any other unit you take.
Right.
But your Troggoths would have their own any native healing they have already
doubled.
And then you'd be having, and then you'd be having every combat, and it said every time they fight, so it's opponent's combat, my combat, and those trogs were already hard to kill. So, we'll see.
Pretty brutal. Love it.
Good for them. We have a couple of local Gloomspite Git players,
so they're pretty excited about that.
Yeah,
I'm excited about new stuff coming out down the line, but we've already talked about that.
Yeah, we are 1 month and 14 days from Adepticon, by the way.
No, it's so exciting. I'm pumped. I'm ready. But we had something that I thought could have been revealed maybe at Adepticon come out this week as a reveal. Because we were commenting earlier this week that they skipped over Horus Heresy Thursday.
They did.
There was no article on Heresy Thursday, and it's like, that's a weird thing to do because they had specifically said, hey, it's back. We're doing it again. We're going to make sure we do it every week. And then, 3 or 4 weeks later after they make the announcement, it's like it's suspiciously missing.
Yeah.
But then Friday they come out with Heresy.
And the article even says Heresy Friday, so there must have been some delay for some reason.
And so we had the new character series from Forge World version of Angron, Demon Ascended, and I think spoilers, the character that he just runs over.
Yeah.
Is that what she is?
No.
Okay.
He ran over basically the first leader of the Sisters of Silence.
Okay.
And that was Karn, where he accidentally ran through her and didn't even know he did it.
Oh, it was Karn.
Yeah.
Okay.
But Angron, so the officer that they show, she was a commander on the World Eater's ship, and she somehow was like the one human who survived when the World Eaters went nuts and were killing everybody. They had this weird respect for her. And even when they were losing their minds in the story, it was like Karn would stand next to her and he would be basically drunk with blood rage, like wanting to slit her throat and do everything that they do to humans. But he wouldn't. Something about being around her, he could like get it under control. So he became a voice of reason for Angron, and she was a voice of reason for the Legion. And like, pretty badass character that she survived it all. It was only like later on in the Siege of Terra series you find out she's basically at some point died, and everybody on this ship, it's just a ghost ship. Everybody's dead who's here, and she didn't even realize, like Sixth Sense style, she's in control of it. She's just talking to a bunch of dead people.
Weird.
Because Karn manifests back on the ship after Sigismund kills him, and she didn't know how he got back there. And then it was like she realized all of a sudden, like, oh, I'm dead. Like, we're all dead on the ship. Anyway, she was neat. She was kind of a mainstay figure on the World Eater ship. Maintained control of it when everyone turned psycho. So they've released a model for her, and it's simple.
Yeah,
she's an Imperial officer.
Like it, yeah, I mean that's a great stand-in for just an Imperial officer.
Yep.
You know.
Yeah, I could even see using her like in well, we have so many little human units now in 40K.
Yeah.
Between what whatever Fortress released, and then you have the police ones. What are they called?
Arbites.
The Arbites.
Yeah.
And you have the ones that Imperial Knight players were using, and like and then of course you have
Voidsman,
Scions, and all that.
You
could use her as an officer.
Seers.
Yeah, you could use her.
Sorry, Chris.
Skaven.
Yeah. No, all of the rogue traders and all those retinues and stuff.
And you could use her as an officer in any of those, and she would look fine. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then of course the Angron. So we might end up an unpopular voice here, but the internet really geeked out, especially on Instagram, about it. Comments to the extent of like, oh, we finally have an Angron that matches the artwork, and it was like, but I looked at it and was immediately not impressed. The details seemed very crowded on it. His body shape was a little bit like a triangle kite, where it was like wide and flat. You commented that his face, like many of these, was like kind of stoic and almost too handsome. They really have a design problem, they being Forge World, when it comes to wings.
Right.
From Kabanda to then Fulgrim and now this.
And I'm sure there are more examples, but
Yeah.
those are three that stick out very far, right? Because you have... Imagine you're going somewhere, wanting to bring this model with you. How do you do it?
Those wings standing straight up in the air like that.
Like... When they measured Fulgrim, he was like 13 or 14 inches tall at the
Right.
tip of his wings. Resin.
Yeah,
It's
there's the problem
it's
right
like,
there.
Gee, I mean, even if it was plastic, I wouldn't be excited about trying to transport that thing. But it's like, what?
Yeah, the
This
plastic
thing is unfeasible.
The plastic has some like spring and give, and like the resin doesn't. I mean, the resin breaks, and the resin also casts less consistent. It's more fiddly to work with, and
It's heavy too.
And the paint job didn't do it a ton of favors. I think both the Fulgrim and the Angron are fine representations of Horus Heresy versions of them right when they ascended to demonhood.
Sure.
But the fact we have gorgeous plastics for them,
right,
just to me makes them seem less like we were saying like 10 years ago. These would have been stunners,
right?
But because we've got modern plastic,
some of the steam has been taken out of the release because it's like, well, you already gave us plastic Angron, who I think looks great.
So do I. And so many people have done really cool versions of him and conversions.
The new Fulgrim, I think, looks great, even though people make fun of the heads that they provide, the face. The paint job goes a long way.
Yep. And don't pick that one head you find derpy. He's got 5 heads in the box. Like,
whereas, like, when you look at these Forge World ones, they're like, okay, well, they're very similar to the other ones, but they're so big and open and just unwieldy. It's like you weren't supposed to play with these models. The other ones are meant to be played with, I think, and that's why they're a little more tucked in. But then a Commanda was the other one that I think has the opposite problem. Commanda was not fiddly at all.
No.
They decided to chunk him up.
Yeah.
Right? Like if Commanda was just like, if it was just plastic, or if they had given like plastic wings or done something different with his wings, because they're weird. The wings on him are odd. They're like upside down, but also like flappy, and like they're made of cloth. But like they're like half an inch thick.
Right, they're
just a weird design.
It's like when you get the provolone sandwich cut at the deli is how thick his wings are. Yeah. Like they're just a little too chunky.
Yeah. And then like the one is like literally flipped upside down. It's like why is his wing upside down? Like his hand part of it, his thumb part of his hand is like touching the ground. I don't understand the design in that model at all. It's good other than that, but he ends up looking just like Angron in plastic, though.
Yeah.
Or just like an alternate of a Bloodthirster. Like, there's nothing special about it.
We even had one of our locals who doesn't really ever play the games, but that's what she thought it was like, oh, they're releasing the Bloodthirster again? It was like, no, this is not really different in design.
Maybe like Scarbrand, whatever. But yeah, I just don't think these models were improvements on the plastics, and I loathe to think what the price tag is going to be for them too. Well, because that's another thing is I don't think it's a superior model, but it'll be $380 or something for the kit.
We already know what the Fulgrim one costs.
Yeah.
Compared to the plastic one, it's almost twice the price, and you're going to see the same thing with this one.
Yeah.
And when you stand them next to each other, I don't think you're going to really think that resin one looks better than the plastic one. So that said, it's cool if there's people who are excited and going to get it. I'm excited to see what some of the awesome artists come up 100%. With, but I don't know. To me, it was just okay.
Yeah.
I think where Forge World really excels is when they do stuff like Legion-specific Praetor. Like when they did that Iron Warriors one, looked great.
Sure.
And they bling it up a little more than it used to. That's really their bag now. But I actually think the best part of Horus Heresy right now is the fact that most of the units and vehicles and kits, GW pumped out plastic versions.
Right.
I think that makes it way more accessible for people to play. So
I don't know, and in sort of a way too, it's also been like updates to 40k armies, because it's like a rhino's a rhino, man.
Oh yeah, if you want to use it,
why would I want to use an if I didn't want to use an old 20-year-old plastic rhino kit?
No,
I could use the new
absolutely
Legion rhino. That's maybe a different style, but on the same exact footprint.
Same footprint, and you could do it with any of them. The Predator they redid, and like all that.
Exactly.
And then now the Astra Militarum got new Sentinels, but if you like the look of the new Forge World plastic ones, you could use those.
Right.
Like as long as it's on the same base. So I think that is a bonus of the plastics too. Is there is crossover appeal, even though they're trying to separate the games.
Or if you want to play a Malkador instead of a Rogel Dorn, whatever. It's like the same size tank with the same loadouts, and I like this look of this one better. It counts as whatever. It's fine. It just kind of gives you some more options.
It does,
which I like,
and it does still offer that crossover appeal.
But besides this kind of stuff, we've also had some pretty hefty coverage. The old, as they're bringing back some more of the armies from that.
Yeah, High Elves ate up this whole week, right?
Yeah, High Elves was pretty dominant this week with the kind of stuff they were showing off, because they were showing it's a pretty big divergence from High Elves of the past that they had in the other game, right? So in the other game they had your more traditional High Elf archers and spearmen and stuff, but they're really leaning really heavily into specifically Lothern.
Yeah,
and like that part of the world and the elves that come from there, even to the point where they're bringing back the Merworm, which was a destruction monster that they had available for a short period of time. And it's now going to be for the High Elves, the seafaring High Elves, as like just a monster unit that they can bring, which is odd.
Are they trying to suggest it's sort of a Loch Ness type thing?
Maybe.
Like a sea monster?
So I think it's something to how they're justifying it. This is Lore Nerd coming out.
All right.
Is the High Elves and elves in general sort of have a kinship with dragons.
Yes.
That's kind of something they've always had, which does not carry over into some of the other more recent games.
No.
But they've always had a kinship with dragons, and I think the Merworm technically is a sea dragon, which is why they're able to have this bond with them. It's not a flight dragon, flying like a high dragon, but it is a dragon of some type, and that's what's available to them. Living on an island in the middle of the sea, this is the type of dragons that they have.
That's interesting. Is in Tolkien's universe, some of the first dragons that Morgoth created were flightless. They were quadrupedal, worm-like dragons. Like Glaurung, I think, was the first one. Yeah, but it was like that. It was still called a dragon. It just was wingless, dinosaur-like kind of. Yeah.
Oh yeah. So that was. I thought that was interesting with me. I get it.
And again, I'm happy those people are getting stuff updated for them.
Yeah. And like I said, even though it was leaning kind of into the Lothern, it's still pretty much all of the old High Elf kits are going to be available again.
They showed the White Lions the other day.
Yeah, the White Lions and the guy Corhill.
I never remember his name.
It starts with a K. It's something like that. It was the leader of the White Lions. He's going to be
very
I think
blonde-maned.
Yeah. You had your Phoenix
Guard.
Yep. And I assume that means the Phoenixes too. You had your dragon princes. Dragon princes. Are those the ones on the horses?
Yep.
Yeah. Dragon Prince, horse rider. And they're going to have a few new kits that go along with them. These old models. I think, like I said, Corhill. I think that's his name. Might be getting an update. The White Lion guy. There's a new Archmage model and maybe a new some kind of just normal elf lord available as well. The White Lion chariots and all that are coming back.
That wasn't even that old of it. That was late fantasy when that one came out.
Right. Yep. And then the pre-order I think was this weekend. The first starter box, which contains some spearmen,
their Arcane Journal and
stuff like that. And the Arcane Journal and dice. Lord of Trace, which is generic White Lion lord. New Lord of Lothern, which was like a pirate lady with a trident and an eye patch. I think we had seen her a few weeks ago. They're bringing the Illyrian Reavers, which were like the skirmishy horsemen, sword masters, and the normal white lions and the bolt throwers.
I know the idea was because of the way the map is set up for this old world version of the game. Yeah. The High Elves were going to be more seafaring. Right. That entire island of Ulthuan's not really on the map, and so.
But even though they said that, the whole roster is pretty much
still there. Yeah,
there'll be dragon riders and archmages on dragons and stuff like that. I think maybe is the old Finecast one. He's not getting which is unfortunate because the new one does look a lot better. It's the same kind of chunky style because it is a resin model, but
the new generic White Lion Lord looks better than him. Might be newer. Yeah.
So good for that. Keep that project going. It is eating up a lot of resources. Whatever.
Well, because here's the thing. I think a lot of those kits are not just ones that they're sitting on in the warehouse. They have to remake them.
Right.
They have to dedicate production time and scheduling to have the molds pumped back out.
Maybe there's downtime that we're trying to fill, and instead of having nothing to do, fill it with stuff to do.
And not to go slightly negative, but it's interesting is I don't know if you ever saw narratives that go around, and they're not true, but they're disingenuous. But a lot of people who claimed they loved fantasy, yet they're not playing Old World now that it's here, but they used to claim that Age of Sigmar somehow has failed or nobody's
right.
Well, it's funny.
Which I think is funny because I did see something just like talking about this with Beastmen.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a post somewhere that was like, "Oh, the failed AoS experiment is finally coming to an end. Look, AoS kits ported back into Old World," and it was the new Beastmen or the Beast Lord model.
Right.
But it's like they cut the army.
Yep.
They decided after that model was released and came out and they sculpted whatever that they're like, well, Beastmen are going back. Why would we waste this new Beast Lord kit?
Right.
Why not?
Just
put it into and they're like, oh, well, that just goes to show you they're taking it back. And it's like, look, they're not, quote, taking it back. The Old World released after Age of Sigmar.
Yep.
So instead, really, they're taking it into the new game.
Right.
They're not taking it back to the old game.
No.
That game is dead. Get over it.
Right. And it was backed up. So for those who ever read Warhammer, they tend to keep up with a lot of tournament data. And they did an Age of Sigmar, they did a year over year and then a month over month analysis. And they showed that 2023 and 2024, they were up literally every month over month over 2023 in terms of tournament attendance. The only month where they were down at any point in Age of Sigmar's history ever was in the late part of the summer of 2024 when people knew 4th edition was dropping.
Right.
So there was a lower attendance because people were like, well, I don't want to play any of these 3rd ed events because 4th is on the way out in 2 months. So there was July or August or something, it was down. But then even since then, it's gone up. And in 2025 so far, it's off to a start where it's 5% up over the attendance last year. So AoS is getting more play. And the fact that the factions are becoming more well-defined and they're trimming fat, even if the Band-Aid rips hurt. The idea that it's somehow a failed experiment is just not backed up by anything in the real world, not by sales, not by attendance.
Cracks me up.
Yeah. No, the game's big. And we may be biased, but it's also a ton of fun, both the world and the game.
Yep.
So
I have almost no one that I know who plays AoS that comes out of it being like, that wasn't a great game. Almost never. No. Never. Whereas there's plenty of experiences I've seen people have in 40K where it's like, well, I lost really badly. It was a blowout. Opponent got 100 points. I got 9. Or, whatever. It's just
my opponent got insert part of turn 1, and it was over.
Right. That kind of thing. Like there are.
I watched a guy who legit broke his codex over his knee when a game went a certain way.
Yeah.
He was playing his Death Guard, and he was going against some new army that was just dropping at the time. They got through bottom of 1. He grabbed his codex, opened it in the middle, broke it at the spine over his knee, and then threw it. He was done. And listen to the conversations we've seen people have, and it's. I think it's maybe a uniquely 40K thing, but man, the people who have been in the game a long time, they just have fits where they are raging about the game.
Yeah.
Where for 3 months they can't play it because something about it is just some experience in the game that you have to endure if you're going to go to like an event just pisses them off to the point where it's like, I need to put it down for a while.
Right.
I've never seen that happen with Age of Sigmar.
I haven't seen that with most games. I mean, there are some smaller games that have balance problems.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like we'll just throw that. There are bigger games that have balance problems. Mm-hmm. Like balance is a hot button, is a hot ticket item.
And I don't think everyone thinks it means the same thing, but you're right. Yeah.
Balance is not like every army can compete necessarily, right?
Right.
Like I'd say if there are armies still at the bottom, everyone is not a 50% win rate.
No.
And there are still armies that are still below, but they can kind of like they've got their matchups that they win. I think that's still balanced, right?
Yep.
If it's like armies are grouped into tiers, and it's like if you are not the same tier, you can't compete. That's not balanced.
Correct.
Right? There were periods of time in like 40K where there were like 3 armies.
Yeah.
That it's like if you don't play these 3 armies, you can't win because any of these 3 armies will beat any other army below them.
Yeah.
But they have a shot against each other.
Well, and we even would hear conversations where there were some players who preferred it that way because then they only had to prepare for like 2 matchups.
Right, which is crazy.
Yeah.
The mirror match and then these 2 other armies. That's all I got to prepare for. And it's like that's not healthy.
Good. No. Rock, paper, scissors is not good enough.
Yeah, not great. Otherwise, the army played itself against anything else. It's that kind of thing. That's not balance.
No.
I'd say even my definition of balance is even goes a little bit further to say that like if an army is placing in tournaments, but there's one build for it, it's not balanced.
Nope.
Right? If there's one configuration of units and you're only playing with 10% of the army, and that's the only thing that can actually compete, that's also not balanced. That's a different issue. That's internal balance, right?
Correct.
If there are things that are in your book that are cheaper and better than something else in the book for the same like purpose, the same role, that's not balanced, right? Because if something is better, generally it costs more points. If it's got a special rule that even if it's once per game lets it do this really cool thing, and this other thing doesn't have that, but they cost the same, what are we doing here? You know what I mean? Like that's not balanced.
Where I see it, and I'll say this, I think Games Workshop, despite the fact that it's always cool in the community to assume that they don't test the rules or do anything, and we've talked about this ad nauseum, when you hear their designer commentary, and nobody watches them, but I watch them, you listen to them talk for an hour about their thought process behind a recent FAQ or chapter approved, or they absolutely think about these rules at like the smallest level, and they work real hard. And they've even had stretches where you get like every army's between that 45 and 54%, and that's hard.
Right.
One thing I noticed, though, that's another sign of a lack of internal balance. You'll have an army that comes out, codex drops, and when I'm reading through it, maybe I look at it differently because I don't play as much, but I'll see like, man, this army, like I was looking at the Eldari book that just dropped. They look very good. They look fine. And they've got 8 detachments, I think. And I'm looking and I see like 4 or 5 and I'm like, man, these are really cool and you could play this variety of stuff. But then when I see the people who really are in the tournament scene and I look at their thought, nope, none of those are good. You really only play this one. And then when I look at their reason, it's literally because of like one stratagem.
Right.
And so it gets so, and it's not even like a granular thing. It's like they're willing to abandon entire army-wide rules as long as they get access to this one CP stratagem that makes their entire list.
Right.
That to me is not balanced. You have a huge dartboard of units that are really cool. You have all these rules to choose from. One stratagem makes
you laser focus on this one
stratagem, and how much can you abuse it? What unit can get the biggest multiplicative effect of this one CP stratagem?
Right.
And but it sometimes comes down to that. And I guess, again, with an Age of Sigmar mind, we know that the stratagems and the formations, the rules are much more vanilla and don't have that kind of impact.
Right.
So
besides, like, when, as an example, I think I might have brought this up last week, but there was one specific rule that was from one of the new regimental veterans abilities, basically. So in the newest kind of general's handbook, match play version of the game, there are these extra benefits you get for bringing units in your regiments, and you can choose one of them. You can have a bodyguard unit, you can have a monster that doesn't track, or whatever. There's these benefits you can get, very limited for playing in this season. Well, one of them was this blanket rule that you can choose a monster unit, and that monster unit gets a permanent +1 to hit in combat for the rider, for everything, for the rider and the companion attacks, right? And it's like, okay, well, most things can't really benefit too much from that. I mean, your all-out attack, it's like an extra all-out attack whenever that thing's in combat, right? What can really take advantage of that the best way? There's not a lot.
Oh, side note, I forgot that the Gloomspite Gitz Lord, the named guy on the horse or on the wolf, also has that rule. People with enemy units within 6 of him can't use all-out attack. Oof. That's huge. Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. Anyway, but it's like, well, there's a couple units that are actually monsters in units, because it's like single entities can't be reinforced, right? It's like, oh, you bring the thing, it costs this many points. There you go. But there are a couple units that are monsters in units that can be reinforced, and you end up having these situations where when that unit has this multiplicative stacking ability that says, hey, everything in this unit is +1 to hit no matter what, it's too good.
Yep.
It's too good compared to anything else that can take advantage of it as a free 0-point rule, right? And so they made these slight changes, not to make it that much worse for everybody, but to make it a little bit worse for like 1 or 2 armies, right? And it was specifically the Stormcast Eternal Dragon, 2-man dragon unit was a monster unit that you could reinforce up to 4 dragons. Oh. It would end up being like a 720-point unit that if you gave it this ability was +1 to hit for the dragons and the riders all the time.
So much.
And it's like, that is such a massive buff to that unit that it was like, this isn't balanced. So what did they do? They didn't take it away. They said, oh, now it only applies to units that are not reinforced.
Right.
All right. I mean, that's still good.
And that's a very elegant solution. Instead of doing something like they might have done in the past, where it's like, well, now we need to make that Stormcast Dragon unit cost more, or now we need to say excludes
because
them.
Because people take advantage of this. It costs more now. Or it'll say, well, now a unit that is reinforced needs to cost 80 points more, or Stormcast Eternals do not have access to this ability. Like extreme things like that are like, that's not the response.
And that's
we've seen all of those things
and
happen.
Laughably, that's a lot of times the types of suggestions the internet offers.
Or just remove it from the game. It's like, no, it's a cool thing.
Yeah.
Just because one unit abuses it doesn't mean we should remove it.
Right.
But it was the same thing with Gargants. You can bring a Man Crusher mob with 4 giants, little giants in it that were all getting +1 hit.
And they actually ended up really good.
It was
in
too
that,
much.
Yeah.
Now it's fair.
Yep.
Right? And it's fine. So.
Yeah. And those in Age of Sigmar, I feel like those rules, your regiment rules, your formations, and your things like your artifacts and their version of stratagems, again, they don't have such massively multiplicative effects right now, and so it comes more down to like the way you can kind of pick any formation and like play,
right,
and then
you can pick any formation and play with any units,
right?
Because some of them are just like, this is a pretty weak bonus.
Yep. Right.
Like it doesn't. Even if I play with no regiment ability, I'd still be fine.
Spacing and timing your combats is like way more important. And in 40K, it's like spacing matters in a different way. You're trying to create or block fire lanes, but it does. So many of the list revolve entirely around a single stratagem, and I don't know. But that seems to be baked in now because we're entering year 3 of 10th edition, and so I don't know what you do to make that more balanced. So it's like you've got all these stratagems in the book, and anyone only really ever wants to use the one. How do you make the other ones more appealing, or how do you make it so? And I think what ends up making them most abusable is when you have a unit that can have 20 models in it or something that can, where that one CP suddenly is monstrous.
I mean, we're gonna know my thoughts on it, right? I think stratagems need to be like, here's your deck of stratagems you get for playing this army. You can use every time you use a card, you flip it over and discard it.
It's done.
It's done. Stratagems don't have a cost anymore. Get rid of CPs. CPs are stupid.
Right.
You could say, you get these stratagems here. You get to use them each once per game. No cost associated with it.
Right, yeah.
No, like CP generation or being able to use it multiple times or this one's free this turn. No, none of this crap. Just say, nope. You get to use it once per game, and then it's done.
Spearhead kind of does that, right? You get your little pile of cards and you can spend them.
Yep.
And that might be a cleaner option.
Yeah.
40K considered that. And I do think they did better in the move in stratagems when they moved from 9th to 10th. But yeah, maybe they need to get away from the CP generation system and just go with like a deck of cards, and once you spend it, that's it.
Right. Or it's like you get to choose 6 of your... I mean, I don't even like the idea of saying, you get to choose 6 of your 20 stratagems and play with those. Because you'll just put... you'll whittle down to the best 6 and just play with only those. But if it were like a smaller list of stratagems and you got access to all of them, even though some of them are situational or maybe some of them you don't use, right? Because it's a stratagem that's free that says, this turn you get +1 to hit and wound versus vehicles. And the enemy doesn't have any vehicles.
Right, the enemy shows up with Tyranids and they have no vehicle.
It's like, all right, well, you don't use that one this game because it doesn't apply. But you had it as a tool available in case the army you were playing against did have that. And I think you balance it around that. You don't make anything too good.
No.
Even if it's too good, you still get to use it once per game. Right? Like, you don't have to worry about things like Armor of Contempt being used every single phase of every single turn against every single shooting attack.
I feel like the 40K game itself, while I do think this may be the best version of it, it even gets me interested to play it like more often. But it still so frequently boils down to like enough rules that I can count on one hand that you build the entire game around or that the players at the highest level play around. You talked about like how Armor of Contempt used to be that way.
Yeah.
I remember when the index version of the game first came out, and it was, what was the Space Marine rule called?
Oath of the Moment.
Yeah, that was Space Marines themselves on paper sucked.
They still do. Stat-wise, they're still bad.
But people played them
Yeah.
originally because Oath of the Moment was by far the best army rule in the game at the time.
And then you'd play Ultramarines and you'd play Guillimans. You get 2 of them a turn.
Right.
And it was like, hey, do you want to just delete a unit every turn, declare Oath of the Moment, and then the unit will die? Because it's reroll all hits and all wounds against everything that targets it.
Yeah.
That'll kill things, even if you've got bad weapons.
And now we see where some armies will rise to the top because of a single stratagem that is...
Custodes were like that for a while.
Yeah.
Black Legion was like that for a while because you could take a Nurgle, you could take Abaddon and a unit of Nurgle guys and charge them straight across the board, because every time you try to target them, you'd cast a stratagem on them that made it so you can't target them with shooting attacks. It was like an untargetable Land Raider full of Abaddon and Terminators that would get to you no matter what. And then once they were there, you can't
They're a
kill
Death Star,
them.
yeah.
They win. And so it was that kind of thing. And just because of Mark of Nurgle. That was it. It enabled the whole thing to happen.
Yeah, and
it's absurd.
It's so weird. Now
Cloud of Flies or something. I don't remember.
It's a game where lethality is expected. And so you play knowing stuff's going to die. It's still you go, I go. So like you have to deal with the fact that if you're at bottom of 1, you're going to start the game with less points than your opponent. But it does that all the time, where the game is wrapped around a lot of times a single stratagem, a single special rule, a single build. But we see a little more variety pop in there nowadays, which shows they try. And so to your point earlier, the balance umbrella is widening.
Right.
To include more than just, well, is each faction represented here? Yes, okay, then we're balanced. And so now it's like they want to make more units within each army playable, more battalions within or formations, detachments, whatever, within each army playable.
And part of that is the detachment ability, right?
Yeah.
Where it's like you're incentivized to bring certain units because those units get a buff in this detachment. Therefore, those units are more valuable, and maybe they edge out their competitors in the book because this detachment buffs them just enough to make them better.
Yeah,
and it's like, okay, that gives it a competitive advantage, right? That makes balance by having small.
Well,
benefits
now then when you run into say Tau or Gene Stealer, Cold or Votan, all of a sudden you might see 3 different builds instead of 1.
Right.
That's always the same. And that is great.
But that also feels bad because it's like either that one build that they had before was either so good that it just beats everything, or you learn how to play against that one build that works and you shut them down every time you play against it. You know, like that feels bad too.
Yep. Yeah, and I think it's more fun for the players of each faction when they have variety, when they have, because I know from like Magic the Gathering tournament play, when they had seasons that were rock, paper, scissors, where it's like, well, there's really only 2.5 decks at the top.
Right.
And that does get boring when it's like, I can't really play outside of this. But then you get into a format, and it does bother some tournament players, but it's like, oh man, now there's like 12 decks that are really good. And you can't prepare for all of them, so you have to hedge your bets.
Right.
But you as a player then get to experience variety in your own deck building. Well, list building, same thing. If you're playing an army that's got a ton of options, which say Eldari have, it's going to be really sad for those players if there's only one build that works. Whereas they got 5 builds that work,
right.
That's way better. Way better for the game. Yeah. And GW wants to sell models. You want to incentivize people to sell models, make everything in their army better.
Right. Maybe not sell the same models over and over and over again.
Right.
It's like just oversaturate the market with the same models. Spread out your roster and make them sell everything.
Yeah.
100%.
No one to rip Band-Aids. Yep.
Yeah.
And again, I think both games seem to be like just driving towards better spots in that regard, like inching towards like better balance. I'm sure we'll have weird periods again, but
yeah, I'm wondering when we get done with all of our battle tomes in 40K, what that's going to look like. Because like when armies have updates, they like to drop new editions. They don't like to let it sit and simmer for a while. It's usually like, okay, the last book is out. We're going to announce a new edition now in 3 months.
Yep.
Sorry you got the last book. No one wants to play anymore. Yeah. That feels really bad.
It does.
Guard and World Leaders had that last edition where it's like, here's your new books. Are you going to buy it?
And by the way, truckloads of models.
Yeah. Cool. You got them. 3 months on the clock. Go.
Yeah.
And then your book.
By the way, there's
invalid.
0 major events between now and 10th edition.
Yeah. So that sucked. That sucked for them. But I wonder if it's going to be the same kind of thing here, or if it's going to be like, all right, well, everything's out. We're not releasing any new books. Here's a new supplement. Here's a new season, whatever. Let's play with this for a while.
We've called for that, like, and I know I've seen other players talk about that, where it's like, well, how about once every army's up to date, you let a mature edition exist, and the only changes you make are a new chapter approved or a new tournament packet season or whatever, and let people with their armies that have gone through balances and rebalance and balance passes and points passes now all play in this version of the game. Now you have a mature version of the game. Why not give it 6 months or a year?
Take the completed edition.
Yeah.
And now you can tweak some points. You can tweak some, balance it out a little bit and let people play with it. It will get stale.
Yes.
I mean, that'll happen. But staleness isn't immediate.
No.
Right? Like, it'll take 6 to 9 months for it to get stale, and people will be willing to be like, all right, I think it's time for the next thing.
Right.
And that's when you roll out the next one, right? Like, you don't announce immediately a new edition is coming and then completely deflate everyone's excitement for the game being completed.
Yeah, and I think sometimes even as soon as they do it, now people don't care what else is coming out in this edition. And you see those like Warhammer style stats where it's like, well, now we have 2 months where nobody's playing.
Right.
And so you're right. I don't think, like, for example, at this Adepticon, they should announce 11th edition when we know there's still 6 books coming out.
Right.
Hopefully that's not till next year or whatever. I agree. I think a mature edition needs to cook for a minute, and you need to give the armies that had their books come out late time to play in the edition. Even though the indexes let them play, it's not the same. It's not.
It's not. It's watering down the rules. And like we had seen with these last couple index, it made things way more vanilla. Like, this is probably the simplest, at least stat line and rules, paragraph on every unit. This is probably the simplest version of the game we've ever had. Because it's like, even in the era of like, you have no special rules, but you have, here's a list of all of the USRs you have.
Yeah.
That was still more complicated than what we have right now in 40K and in AoS for a lot of things, right? Because it's a lot of times it's like, oh, here's a unit, here's your stat line, your weapons, you have your movements on there and everything. You have one ability.
Yep.
When an enemy charges you, you have a chance to do mortal wounds to them. That's your only ability you have. That is so dumbed down and simple, right? These kinds of things make it the most simple version of these games, and I think that might make it stale quicker, and I think that might make it a little less exciting, especially when new books come out and they don't add anything to those units.
Yep.
That doesn't feel great. And that's one of the complaints I think the community in general has had about battle tomes recently is there's no power creep because they're not adding anything besides new units when they do.
Right.
There's nothing being added to the existing units. right? There's no wording changes. There's no increase in damage for their abilities. There's no changes.
And it's funny is it's like, well, we were for the idea of no power creep. We didn't know that also meant
no creativity, no changes in
no changes, period. Yeah.
And it's like you could tweak things and make them better without making them power crept.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can make a newest army interesting by putting more like attention into it and giving it new creative rules.
Or make 2 units that were functionally similar now make them so they're very different, right? I know with the new Aspect Warriors there was some attempt at that, so you didn't have like Scorpions, Banshees, and whatever all trying to do the same thing. I don't know 100% what that looks like. I didn't thoroughly read through the codex, but that is something you could do.
Right.
And sometimes with these Index to Battletome and AOS 4 so far, it just feels like it was like, nope, nothing's changing from Index to Codex other than we're changing like the main rule or here's new kits that came out.
And now you need to charge $60 for it. And now they get locked immediately.
Have we complained about that?
Yeah, they get locked immediately when like the book goes on pre-order.
Immediate, yep.
And you're like, okay, so it's not even out yet, but for these 2 weeks it's not out yet. You hid my rules from me. I
made the mistake of hitting update on my app, and now I can't look at it.
I've seen people talk about how they were going to tournaments and they were playing like Oryx, and their app updated for them, and like the day before, that Friday before a tournament, and now they cannot play their army because the rules are locked. It's like that's a problem.
And here's the other thing: depending on when your store sells you the book,
right? That's
you could buy the new book on Thursday or Friday if it's in. But it doesn't technically unlock in the app until Saturday.
Right.
And so you'll enter it and not get it updated. You still can't look at it.
Yep.
So if you have a tournament, you might not have even the new rules, and then you got to look at the book, and they're mostly invalid. And
But we've complained about that before.
What?
It's a problem that I think a lot of people have, and it's not going away. You know, like it's sticking around, which is unfortunate. Maybe like I think that's one of the weakest parts of like the Warhammer games at the moment is just the accessibility. Right, the games, the models are getting more expensive.
They are.
We've seen that happen. Look at Greater Demons, right? When the Greater Demons for every army came out, they
even
were like,
single infantry-sized character boxes,
yeah,
which were $35 for a long time, are now $45, I think, or $44.
Yeah. But like the big centerpiece models, right? Like if you want to go play Slanesh, you need a couple of keepers. Well, 3 years ago you would pay $240 for 2 Keepers of Secrets. Now you pay $380. That's a huge jump. It's like $190 kit.
By the way,
nothing has changed.
If you also need Glutos, Dexessa, and whatever,
Sinessa,
there's more centerpiece kits that are in that $100 range.
Yeah, it's that aside, inflation happens, whatever.
Yep.
All the increased costs happen, but just the accessibility of the rules and not being able to like, hey, I just want to test it out. I just want to look at it. I want to see. I want to read it. I want to see what it is before I invest into it. That isn't possible unless you know someone who's got a thing and they're willing to hand you their phone or they're willing to lend you their book. Like,
hey, can I hold and look through your phone for a half an hour?
Right. It's like that's no.
Or
that's not good.
It's still locked behind even when these really sexy box sets come out.
Yep.
And they have an early access version, collector's version of the book. Well, that's still behind a paywall if you have to get that early access box.
Right.
Or again, know someone who opened it and is going to let you thumb through their book for a while. And that's super inconvenient. It really is. I think that's a poor. I think that's a poor decision for the players.
Yeah. But like we said, until we figure that out and how to solve that solution, come up with a solution to that problem.
There we go.
It's still going to be. I mean, it's still the biggest game, right?
It is.
40K is still the biggest one.
It's we got to a point where we can gripe about minor things,
right?
Yeah.
However, I would still like to see it change.
Yep.
You can like something, but still complain about it.
Yep.
We do it all the time.
Of course.
I mean, I always do it.
It's the only thing we do. It's like our favorite thing.
I mean, like I go to like restaurants, and have a really good meal, and I'm like, yeah, but they could have done this differently. Even though I thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yep.
I could be like, I would have done this differently,
right.
Or I would have added this to it and taken that. Like you can still do that. You can still complain about things and critique things without being an expert. That's another thing too.
Yep.
And I bring that over to like the hobby side of the thing of the games too. It drives me nuts when you look at something going back to like Angron, for example. We don't think that the paint job on Angron highlighted some of the key points of that model.
No,
I think the paint job was a little weak in some areas, and that doesn't help this model.
Right.
Like I said, there's no fixing those wings besides giving him different wings.
Yep.
Like, they're absurd. Go look at them again. It's like the wings are two arms that he's reaching straight backwards and up, and then extending out his fingers as wide as they can and pointing to the sky. It's going to be like a 13-inch tall model. Like, it's absurd. But could I paint that to that level? Maybe not, or it would take me frickin' forever. But guess what I can do? I can critique that paint job.
Yep.
Right? Like, there are times when I've gone and been like, oh, well, I'm not a fan of this, I'm not a fan of that, whatever. And I'll have people come back to me and say, well, I'd like to see you do better. It's like, you know what? Fuck you. I don't need to be able to do better to show you that there's something wrong here that needs to be improved.
When I tell you this, when a fan of a sports team has critique about a coaching decision that was made or about a play that a player made, you'll hear that same kind of thing. It's like, oh, I'd like to see you go out there and do that. It's like, that doesn't mean I don't have the right to critique it.
Right.
Like,
exactly.
Yes, I'm an observer and maybe I can't do what they do. But on the outside looking in, sometimes you have that unbiased set of eyes and can, going back to when you look at like Angron, this Forge World version, I just think the paint job they gave it and the style they put into it did not help any of the details. And I think I need to see it in bare resin. Otherwise, I don't think that whatever studio paint job they chose, I don't think it did it any favors.
Right.
Whereas, like, I don't know, the cleaner heavy metal style that you see on the plastic kits kind of helps any kit for the most part, because it does exactly what it's designed to do, which is just like very clean, outline the features, show where one detail starts and one ends. A very simple color scheme. I think that does a good job of showing the model. The bare plastic still is a better test, but yeah, I don't know who they get. I don't know if they get random people in the Forge World studio to do their paint jobs, but I don't know. It was like shiny. It was kind of muddy. It was like just hard to get a read on it.
I mean, it's fine, but you're right. The really wide, flat like body doesn't do it any favors.
It reminds me of the shape of Starscream when he'd be in like humanoid form.
A little bit.
You know?
I don't like that he's not like demon here, full demon. Like, he's kind of still Space Marine shaped. Like,
yep.
He's still kind of man size. He's got these really weird like long legs, and he's in this weird like spread stance.
Yeah.
And then his arms look a little stubby for how long his legs are. His head, I mean, I think talk about a bad head and face. I think the one they chose for that one is not great. He doesn't, I don't know. Something's not right there. I don't like it. He looks like something from like Hellraiser or something. I don't know. It's just there's just something off about that model. But again, I'm allowed to do that. I'm allowed to critique it.
I'm allowed to not like it.
Right. Yeah.
Or not like it as much.
Reasons. Yeah. His wings are bigger than him. Each of his wings is larger than him. It's too much. Tuck him in.
Yeah.
Whatever. But
well, if they were going to make him look stoic and just standing there, then make his wings look like they're not needed right now.
Right.
Have him folded down. Have him.
Or gosh, take the wings off in general. The model looks better without wings at all.
Yeah.
Just cover it up and look how cool that model looked. Like, that looks like a half transformed Angron who hasn't gone demon yet and he doesn't have the wings.
Right. He's on his way there, but
that looks cool. But yeah. But yeah, so like, people like I said, people are allowed to have their own critiques. You don't have to like belittle them because they're either inexperienced or because they're less skilled or because they don't have an expertise.
Yep.
Like,
it's like one thing to trash on it and you have no experience or expertise. It's also another, if the only opinion anyone ever has is the negative and the critique. Like, we've talked about that, where it's like, no matter what, in this example, Games Workshop does, the only things people fire off is negative.
Yeah.
We can have a general appreciation for it, talk about what we like, and then say, well, but they could do this as far as the price gate for people to get in. That's having critique, even though you still like mostly what the product's up to. But I'm not a sculptor.
Right.
That doesn't mean I can't critique the sculpt.
Right.
I don't run a manufacturing company. That doesn't mean I can't critique some of their business practice choices if it really affects the consumer in a way that's not enjoyable.
And while you are a painter,
yep,
that gives you permission to critique the paint job. Even a non-painter can be like,
correct,
you're missing something here.
Yep.
Me as an observer, something's off. I couldn't create the effect that I'm desiring, but something's not right here.
You can look at it and just decide, like, I don't like the look of that. I don't know.
So, chill out. That's the moral of the story.
Chill out.
But I was talking about eating earlier, and I think we should get back to that.
We could get back to that.
Yeah.
Let's go do that.
Yeah. Let's eat.
Thanks for joining. We hope you enjoyed. Follow us for more of our weekly episodes on YouTube Podcasts, Spotify, and Podbean. You can follow myself and Llama on Instagram. We are at Llama Paints Minis and Hyena Paints Minis. Music provided by Kevin MacLeod at incompetech.com. And as always, we'll catch you next time.